Thanks for joining me. This is a very well-known topic. We all know what war is like, and especially this war, the South African War, or more commonly known as the Second Anglo-Boer War. The First Anglo-Boer War took place in 1881 and it lasted only 4 months. It led to a victory for the Boers against the British of Queen Victoria. Now regarding the Second Anglo-Boer War from 1899 to 1902, there's a lot of information available on that. A very interesting documentary on YouTube is Scorched Earth. The link is in the description below. In this video I want to share a little bit of history about the Pietersburg camp and some events that you may not know about. The Transvaal was the most northern part of South Africa. In December of 1899, a commander under Mr. Krobler defended the northern border. He later retreated because there wasn't much of a threat on the northern side. For the next 6 months, there was not much happening in the Transvaal. Many of the Boers actually went home and returned to their farms. They later joined the British Army. Others went to assist the Boers in the Orange Free State and the Natal, where the war was actually fought. Now this was the most northern concentration camp, and the closest one was 150 kilometers away at Nelstroom. Pietersburg was invaded on the 8th of April 1901, and patrols were sent out to round up all the Bosvelders, as per the Scorched Earth policy. The Bosvelders, that was what the British called the people in the northern Transvaal. Families camped out in town. Some had wagons, others only had a blanket for the child. The concentration camp was only set up on the 10th of May 1901 and opened the next day under Superintendent J.E. Tucker. Now even before April of 1901, when Pietersburg was invaded, there were already 150 refugee families living in town on their wagons. These families viewed the concentration camps as a safe place because the war fought in the northern Transvaal was a little bit different than in other parts of South Africa. The British were only interested in goldfields in the Witwatersrand and didn't venture too far into the northern parts of South Africa. The Boers, women and children on the farms were more afraid of the natives that were assisting the British, the English Kaffirs as they were called. Women was forced to undress and prepare food for them naked. They raped them. Girls were sexually assaulted before taking them to the British. They were herded along like cattle, travelling up to 6 days on foot, and the natives looted all their belongings. So these people had anything left. They didn't have kitchen utensils, extra bedding, clothing, nothing. The British relied a lot on the assistance from the native tribes in the northern Transvaal. Now, this was the area where the natives and Afrikaners did have some history, and some tribes did have a score to settle. These are individuals who were civilized only in their traditional ways. Even British soldiers wrote about the savage rage in which they would conduct their raids, and that even they were disgusted by it. The Boer families in the northern Transvaal actually fled to Pietersburg when there wasn't even a camp set up. Now while there was not a camp in Pietersburg before May 1901, most individuals were transported by rail to Irene close to Pretoria. The refugees in town were moved to the camp when it opened. But by the end of May, there were still 300 individuals living in town. At the end of June, all the refugees were moved to the camp, except for a few that had special permission to stay in town, but still buy provisions from the camp. All the shops were closed in town during that time. Now the camp was located 2.5 kilometers west of Pietersburg, against the slopes of the Sand River. Tents were in the rows with a distance of 15 and 11 meters in between them. When the camp opened, there were 300 tents, 3 EP tents and 25 Marquis tents, with a total of 1,113 residents. By the end of August, there were 3,713 residents. At the end of November 1901, there were 700 bell tents, 9 EP tents and 80 Marquis tents in different sizes. Now some of these tents were used as schools, a church, medical facilities, but still a quarter of the people didn't have any beds at that time. It seems that even with the amount of tents at the end of November, overcrowding was still a problem. And some Boer families resorted to building their own houses. They did, however, have more access to firewood, being in the bushveld, than those people in the Orange Free State. They built stone ovens for baking, and there was a stream and there was a supply of fresh water from the Sand River. A vegetable garden was also started in August of 1901, and in January of 1902 fresh vegetables was given to the hospital. There were also potatoes and mealies for the residents. Now, apart from all the problems, diseases, overcrowding, small food portions and so on, it seems that the everyday life of the Pietersburg residents was a bit more bearable than in other camps. But on the other hand, Emily Hophouse wasn't allowed to visit the camps in the Northern Transvaal. Now, I'm guessing that is because it's in a malaria area, and during her visit in South Africa, a lot of people were infected with malaria in the northern concentration camps. However, on January 23rd, 1902, General C.F. Bayers decided to attack the camp. He needed some supplies and more horses, and decided to get it from the British. The British troops ran away and were hiding at the station when the commando of 40 Boers arrived that morning. No shots were fired. 140 men and 10 younger men left with the commando. Early in February, it was ordered that the White Camp would be broken down and moved 800 kilometers south to Colenso in Natal. And so on the 12th of February 1902, the first trains left the station to Colenso. The last train left on the 18th of February, and the total number of 3,800 people were moved to various camps in Natal. This was a huge inconvenience. There were no accommodation, and all the tents and the belongings would only arrive days later. The only group of people that stayed behind were the Bantu people from Mara. This was a colored race from the Base family, a group of about 180 people that were housed in a separate camp. Now, at the end of May 1902, peace was declared, and in July 1902, families were moved back to the Transvaal. The camp and facilities needed to be erected again. Families were allowed to leave the camp if they had all the necessities to restart their lives on the farms. At the end of August, school opened again, and the people were allowed to visit the church in town. A lot of families left the camp, and at the end of December, the school closed again due to the low number of children in the camp. 26 of these children were orphans, and they were sent back to the camp in Irene. And from July to December 1902, a total number of 3,632 people were released from the camp. Only 194 remained. Beginning of February 1903, there were no more refugees in the camp, and it was closed. Between 600 and 800 people lost their lives in the camp, mostly due to malaria and measles. Families returned to the farms that has been destroyed completely by the native tribes. The British described the Boers as a lost and hopeless people, and none were more cut to the knees than the North. Early of 1901, a special commando was created, mainly made out of Australians, that came to assist the British. The Australians were a lot more adapted to the terrain of the Northern Transvaal than the British. They were called the Bushveld Cabineers. On the 5th of August 1901, Captain F. Hunt and his bushveld Cavaliers attacked a farm near Mujazi's Kloof. During this attack, he was shot. His body was found the next day mutilated. He was succeeded by Captain Morant. Now, Captain Morant blamed the Boers for this mutilation, but it seems more like a native African style thing, and bodies left in the veld were often eaten by scavenger birds and wild dogs. He wanted to seek revenge, and on the 23rd of August 1901, near Elim, 11 Boers were executed. In February 1902, Captain Morant with 3 of his officers were convicted of murdering 20 Boers and kicked off the force by Lord Kitchener. Now just imagine how gruesome and savage those executions were, to get convicted of murder while fighting a war and then to be kicked off the force by Lord Kitchener himself. Some people say they were used as scapegoats by the British Empire, but they did indeed adopt some of the manners that the natives used in their attacks on the farms. Remember, the natives were very traditional and spiritual people. They had savage ways in which they killed. Some of the innards of the enemy were eaten to make them stronger. Some Gomas used body parts for medicine and communication with the ancestors. A good example of this is the attack on a group of people 50 years earlier, where Hendrik Potgieter was flayed alive. His skin was used to make a drum. His hair was worn as spray by Chief Mokopane. Children's sexual organs were removed and used as muti by the Sangomas. 2 Boer men tortured for hours and then set alight on stakes, so that with their screams they can call their ancestors for them. Even still in 1900, in the Congo, the Belgians cut off the hands of the natives when they didn't perform as required. Penises were hung from the trees just to scare the enemies away. This is Africa, and war on the African continent is much different than war on other continents. After the war, the British assisted some farmers to rebuild what was lost. The residents were allowed to keep the belt ends to have accommodation while the farmhouses was being rebuilt. But they indeed got what they came for, our gold and diamonds. After the war, mining activity increased, and the only people that suffered were the Boers and their farm workers. It also feels that in a way that the scorched earth policy was so successful that it is still practiced today. Farmers are being tortured and killed on the farms in a hope to scare others away. Every year 100 to 200 farmers are killed on their farms. We also need to remember this was not a white war. All races were involved. Now in South Africa we have 11 different languages. That is 11 different ethnic groups. Afrikaners, English, Xhosa, Zulu, Pedi, Venda, Tswana, just to name a few. It is historically not correct to refer to all of them as black people, but we need to distinguish between these groups. Some of these groups got along well with the Voortrekkers, and Louis even assisted Chief Rasetu in battles with the Vendas. The native tribes often clashed with one another. It's like saying the English and the French people are the same, because they are white, but they are completely different people. We also need to understand this was war, but there are those individuals that remember how to scare people off farms and carry this history on orally. But that's a video for another day. Thank you so very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.